FOMO.
I don't expect anyone who uses my methodology to have the perfect life where everything one step follows another. That just doesn't happen. Events happen. People you love leave, okay? Or kid goes off the rails, or there's a pandemic. I mean, a lot of stuff happens to you, but if you don't know where you're going, just about any road will do, as Lewis Carroll said. And so I'm all about trying to identify what it is we want to do, so at least we know what road to get back onto when we fall off.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome to another episode of FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, and today we are talking to Suzy Welch, who is a fascinating person. I actually heard about her years ago because I read a book she wrote with her late husband, Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE. But she, apart from all that, writing books with Jack, has an incredible career that has spanned everything from being a reporter to consulting to being a professor now at NYU, where she teaches this really amazing class called Becoming You, Crafting the Authentic Life You Want and Need. And I heard about this class and about Suzy's work at NYU from Aaron Malone, who's a listener to the show. And when I looked it up, I said, this is so FOMO Sapiens. We got to have Suzy on, and she's an amazing guest. So prepare yourselves for some awesomeness. Now, Suzy is a business journalist and best-selling author with expertise in leadership change, corporate governance, and career development that has included roles as a crime reporter for the Miami Herald. And then after attending Harvard Business School, she continued at Bain & Company and Harvard Business Review. As I mentioned, she wrote 2 bestsellers with Jack Welch, Winning and The Real Life MBA. And she also wrote a book on her own that was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, 10-10-10, A Life-Transforming Idea. Love that idea. Now, after her husband's passing, Suzy became a professor of management practice at NYU's Stern School of Business, where she teaches the class, as I mentioned, Becoming You, Crafting the Authentic Life You Want and Need. So it's a fascinating episode, great guest, you're going to love it. And as you know, I start every episode with the same question. So I started by asking Suzy this. Tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
Well, I am sad to say that I discovered something when I was around 60. I'm 64 now. And that I am happy to say I teach to my students in their 20s. So even though I didn't get it till later, they get it earlier. And it is that you can and should be the author of your life and not the editor. And we spend so much of our life with people writing the chapters for us and with us, telling us what we're good at and what we should be and what the world expects of us. And we then end up editing our dream of a life. And a moment occurs for some of us later in the game and some of us earlier. I admire the people who do this early in their lives, and some people do. But for me, it was quite far along where suddenly I thought, wait, I can have the pen in my own hand and write the narrative, and others may edit it, and they will. I have 4 children, therefore I have editors. But I would say that moment where you allow yourself to be the author of your life, that was a huge revelation to me, and it's now part of my gospel. So
yeah, it's one of those things. I think you're right. It's like, I always see the people who do it really early. And sometimes I think to myself, maybe too early, because there is some value to like just shutting up and listening and learning and being like, sort of in sort of follower mode, as it were. But what happens, and I think this will be the topic today, is that we can get stuck in that mode and never move out of it until something happens, some external exogenous factor forces it, or maybe you're just lucky and you figure it out. Let's get into that though. Let's start there because it's so fundamental and it's really hard work. Like, why are the reasons that we get stuck being the I think about like, the old commercial, the old cartoons with like the motorcycle in the sidecar. Why are we in the sidecar and not driving the motorcycle? So many of us.
Well, there's two reasons. The first is that we don't know our values. And the second is that if we do know them, we allow other people or life forces to mitigate our living of our values. So just to take those apart, there's a lot of question about like, what are values? Well, I spend a huge amount of time in my class at NY Stern, sort of just even telling people what values are. And then you have to figure out what yours are, which are really specific as opposed to what most people think they are, like really broad, like family and financial security, whereas those words like are super complicated, and what your values are within family or financial security can be wildly different from the person sitting next to you on the subway. And then there's the 6 horsemen of values mitigation, those sort of that get in the way of you living by them, even if you know your own values. So just a brief story to sort of say that I am one of the most unlikely people to be even talking about this, because I, as a human being, didn't even know what my values were until I was 28 years old, I think. And I just sort of was bumping along in life like most of us. I went to college and I had jobs, and I had what I thought was a wonderful career as a crime reporter at the Miami Herald. Then a series of unusual events landed me at Harvard Business School because I decided I wanted to be a business journalist, and I didn't know a ding-dang thing about business. So I was the only person in the history of HBS, and probably still the only person who went to learn business instead of network and pivot into a better job. Like I went to business school really to learn what it was designed for, which was to learn
pure.
about business.
I love that.
I was then. Anyway, I went to learn business, and I was paying for business school out of my own pocket, and I did not have any money. And when I got there, I discovered there were this thing called investment banks and consulting firms that would actually pay for your business school, like relieve you of your debt if you got a certain grade point average. And at HBS, there's this thing called Baker Scholars. It's like the top 3% of the class. And I thought, I don't know anything about business, but God darn it, I am going to be one of those Baker Scholars. So I get my debt relieved. It was like, to me, it was like, oh my God, there's a ticket. I can go get it. And so I became determined to work as the harder than any person could. And I did it because I didn't know much about business. For others, it wasn't such a big stretch, I suppose. And I was an absolute unmitigated pill and a bore working away. And well, most people were at business school to make friends and go to parties as well as go to class and to expand their networks. I would literally study with my study group. And when I wasn't studying, I would be thinking about studying, and then I'd go back and study some more. And this did not endear me to my classmates, let me tell you that. And it shouldn't have. Okay. And I always had my hand up in class. I knew one way you got a good grade was to be commenting all the time.
Got to talk a lot.
The professors loved me, And so then the last day of business school, I was walking across campus, scurrying to my car to go home and study. And there was a huge party that night. And I passed one of my my student friends, such as it were. And he said to me, "Are you going to the party tonight?" And I said, witheringly, I looked at him and I said, "Are you kidding? We have classes tomorrow." And he said, "You know what, Suzy? You just don't value fun." Whoa. And I got very defensive and I said, "Of course I value fun." And I was like, I remembered like just a hot feeling going over me of like embarrassment. It was like a lava, stream of embarrassment. And then he biked away. He was on his bike. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't value fun. I don't care at all if I don't have fun. I value getting out of debt. And I actually have a very strong value right now. How much better my life would have been if I had told that to myself and been able to say to people, "I wish I could go to your party, but look, I got different values right now. And one of my values is I'm in very deep debt and I must get out of it. Please, give me the grace to do that without hating me, and give myself some grace." Okay. And instead I just pretended I have the same values as everyone else, but I was just not, I don't know. It was a terrible misalignment between my authentic values and everybody's assumptions about me. And this was the beginning of me thinking, well, what are values and what are mine? And then if you I really started to think about it, I started to read about it, actually. I was very curious about values. I had never discussed them in my family. I'd never discussed them at all. And this was a different time. It was 1988. It wasn't like people were out discussing them, okay? But then lo and behold, many, many years later, I started working for the Oprah magazine, and I ended up coming up with a decision-making tool called 10-10-10. I wrote a book about it, which did well. And I went on the road with Oprah's columnist, but also for my book tour. And I used to say from the stage, look, 10-10-10 is a great decision-making tool, but it's even better when you know your values. It actually is much more powerful, and you can't really use it unless you know your values. And then I would look out at the audience at this, sea of faces sort of staring at me desperately. And then a line would form and people in the audience would come up and say, wait, how do you know your values again? What are values? Aren't all values family? And I was like, no. And this is when I actually began the work that landed me in the classroom, is really when I started to do the work around how do we know what our values are? Let me help people get to this place. And I started devising some of the tools and exercises I now use in the classroom to help excavate your individual values, your authentic values. And this is probably the long-winded answer to the question that you had. And I can't even remember the question because I went on for so long.
No, you answered the question, but you've given me a lot to work with here. The first thing I will say is I remember when I went to business school, why did I go? Because everybody else was going, and I just thought that was the next step. And I didn't know anybody who'd gone to Harvard Business School. I applied being like, okay, like I was a good student. I got there, and I was correcting the mistake I made in undergrad, which is my undergrad. My fear was I was coming from, middle-class background. It was a lot of money. I just wanted to get high grades and succeed. And I did that. And I remember graduating, looking around and being like, I didn't really make any friends here. Like I made friends, but not really friends. So when I went to business school, I had made some money. I had, like savings, and I wanted to optimize for fun. And so I did, I was at all those, I wouldn't have said that to you because I'm way more EQ than that, but I definitely would have been at that party. Now, I'm glad I did that, but did that, if I were to go back, I would have a different frame than I do now. My optimization would be different. What's interesting about values, and I love that you've gone into this, because I think the thing is that we think values are bequeathed unto us by our society, by our family, by our religion. And for a lot of people, it's like, I don't even know if they have the agency to choose what their values are. I mean, what do you think about that kind of framework?
You're not wrong at all that most of our values are received. They're received from our faith, our families, our communities, our time in history, where we live, cultural expectations. And that's exactly where we started, which is when I said you can be the author of your life, not the editor, is that yes, some values come to us. But then as we mature and grow into ourselves and come to know ourselves, we can start to say, yes, that is my value. No, that is not my value. If I was to have gone with every cultural expectation that came from my family and from my heritage and so forth, I wouldn't have worked. And instead, I was so unhappy not working when I had children. We tried it, and I had to go back because I was not living my authentic life. And so, look, some values come to you very young, just about how you interact with your family and so forth. And some you keep your entire life, but others, and values change. I mean, you have kids, a lot of your values change once you start having children, or you find a job that you desperately love and you think, wait a minute, work isn't just what I'm doing to make a paycheck. Work is a calling, and about your values can change, and vice versa. You could say, I'm just working to live. I've got another set of values. It's helping this organization in town that, that feeds the homeless or whatever. And that becomes your value. So they can morph. Some are quite profound and stay with us forever. But you know what? You've got to know the difference if you want to live a deliberate and intentional life. And it's not like I'm opposed to spontaneity. I am very spontaneous, and I'm kind of a prankster, and my family goes crazy over it. But the famous quote, tell me, what will you do with your one wild and precious life?
Yes.
And by Mary Oliver. And when I talk to my students about this, I say, there's a couple key words in here, but one of them is the word plan. Okay. A lot of people obsess on the words wild and precious. And what does she mean by that? And I say, let's talk about planning, because you can make a lot of wrong turns. And I don't expect anyone who uses my methodology to have the perfect life where everything one step follows another. That just doesn't happen. Events happen. People you love leave, okay? Or kid goes off the rails, or there's a pandemic. I mean, a lot of stuff happens to you. But if you don't know where you're going. Just about any road will do, as Lewis Carroll said. And so I'm all about trying to identify what it is we want to do, so at least we know what road to get back onto when we fall off.
FOMO. The point on planning, I mean, I actually used that in my first book, and I focused on the sexy part too. So like, you've just completely changed the way I think about that quote. Now, I appreciate that. I want to talk about the class. You teach this class called Becoming You, Crafting the Authentic Life You Want and Need over at NYU Stern. And you say that you created this class because it's the class you wish you had had when you were doing your MBA. I certainly wish.
Yes.
People just weren't having those convos, right? It was like,
Yes.
The convo was, how do I get into private equity? Now, things have moved, which is very encouraging. But one of the things and I've been reading you've written op-eds recently in the Wall Street Journal about the fact that there are these treadmills that people get on. It's private equity, venture capital, tech. Right. And this is FOMO. I mean, it's what it is. Like, this is, it just is. But when you work with your students and when, having designed this class, like, what is the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah. Okay. So first I want to throw out some props to my fabulous students in my much larger class, which is called Developing Managerial Skills. So I also teach a very traditional class on managerial skills.
Okay.
And I love them. Hey, DMS students, love you very much. Becoming You is the class that I created because I wanted to provide some kind of methodology to students who come to business school and think they can do just about anything. They're there to sort of say, okay, I didn't like what I was doing. Everybody at business school is pivoting. Almost everybody's pivoting, period, in this day and age. At every given moment, everyone's pivoting. And how do you even go about answering, what should I do with my life? I mean, there's just 1,000, I don't like woo-woo answers to that. Well, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. I was like, no, I've got a methodology. Let's do my methodology. And I sort of have, I joke with the students. It's like a factory. You come in, you're lost. And when you come out, you're found because of the methodology. There's no escaping it. And so I did create this class because I wanted to throw a life raft to the students who had gotten on the conveyor belt of consulting and investment banking and didn't want to be there. And look, power to them. I worked in consulting and I have very good friends who are investment bankers, and it is for somebody. Some people really love the financial instrument. And some people, I loved my clients when I was a consultant. It wasn't my lifelong calling, but I learned a lot in consulting. But for others, it's just, they're going there because of FOMO, as you say, or they're going there because consulting narratives are very good. Those consulting firms, when they come along to campus, man, they can sell you the idea that if you go to Bain or McKinsey, you're exposed to this kind of work and that kind of work, and it looks fantastic. And they're not wrong. Yeah. I did it for 7 years. I'm proud of working at Bain for 7 years. That's a fantastic company, and I learned a lot. Should have I been doing something else? Probably. It was definitely not my area of transcendence. So we say in the class, just very, very briefly, what the construct is that what you should be doing with your life lies at the intersection of your most authentic values. That's one sphere. Okay. Imagine 3 balls, really. Your most pronounced and positive aptitudes, which would really be your skills, competencies, and your personality. It matters. Okay. And then the areas of economic growth that interest you. And at the intersection of those 3 things, values, aptitudes, and areas of economic opportunity that interest you, lies what I call your area of transcendence. And that is directly from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People think it tip-topped out at self-actualization. But 12 years after he created that, he was a Brandeis scholar, never given enough credit. After he did the first hierarchy of needs, he revised it saying there's something higher. There's living your best life, self-actualization, plus this feeling of being connected to the cosmos, of giving back, of being involved with something that's bigger than yourself. Those 2 things combined are your area of transcendence. Okay. And that is what I seek to bring my students along to do. So we spend several weeks digging deep and excavating their authentic values, usually a shocking experience, which is why my class has the nickname, the class where everyone cries. And then we have a lot of testing around aptitudes and personality, right? You do not know what your personality is unless you know exactly how the world receives you. Okay. And almost no one does. So we do a lot of testing. And then areas of economic opportunity. Luckily, my students at Stern are very bright and aware and current, and they know where there's areas of economic opportunity. AI. Yeah. But, if you don't love AI, don't go there. It's like, yeah, AI is growing, but do you love it? a lot of, I play industry bingo. It's one of my most popular classes. Every year, most students love industry bingo, and there's always two who hate it. And I say at the beginning, you two who are going to hate this, I'm sorry, but I play bingo with all the industries to introduce my students to these industries they've just forgotten exist, that have gobs of jobs in them that MBAs don't go to. It like never. I remember one student saying to me, "Oh, I love aviation. Why did I never think about that? I'm going to work at McKinsey." It's like, if you love aviation, they're waiting for you, dear MBA.
Yeah.
They just don't think you're interested.
Yeah.
And so it's a process. And at the end, the last day, students stand up and they present to me and the rest of the class the narrative of their life for the next 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, there's, I have cried more times than I can count in that class, stunned by the profound transformation that students go through in front of my eyes. It is hands down the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. It's crazy to see how vulnerable the students let themselves become and how much change they allow themselves to go through in that very intense period of the class.
I remember when I was in business school going to this. At the time, it seemed very out there. Dr. Tim Butler, who runs career services at HBS.
Oh, I know Tim Butler. Sure. Right. He's very smart.
He's super great. But at the time, I was just, I was like a closed-minded, just kind of like I thought I knew everything. Mm-hmm. And I thought like I should work at a hedge fund. Like anybody who knows me, all my listeners know I should not work at a hedge fund. That would be terrible. But that was what people were doing, and there was money and all this stuff, and so whatever. And we did this exercise where we just he was like a meditation kind of thing where we then envisioned how we would spend our days. And in no picture in my mind was I sitting in front of a screen doing research like stuff. Well, guess what? If you want to be good at a hedge fund, you need to love and I remember I had one of my buddies. His he loved that. Like his dream, like if he imagined his perfect day, it would be reading research reports, whereas that's my nightmare. And I remember after that being like, well, that was kind of weird, but I did learn something, which is that I should not try to get a hedge fund job because I would not be happy. It's not what I envisioned for myself. Yeah. So I did, that was served me. I'd love to hear a story from one of your classes, obviously anonymized, but about a student that you had and just how this worked. What was the realization? Where did they, when we start here and we end up there, like what was that journey for this person?
I can think of so many stories. Look, to excavate our values, we do 7 very intense exercises, and to find out our aptitudes, we do 4 very intense different kinds of testing and so forth. So let me try to condense this one student who came in as from hedge funds. He's actually was from Singapore. He had a strong cultural and family expectations that he would take his hedge fund background and that he would pivot to investment banking. And just they had a bunch of different reasons why they thought that was good. He majored in finance, and second semester of second year, he elbowed his way into my class. Much to my chagrin, there's a long waiting list, so not everyone gets into it. He was very lucky, got into it. And he went through the process. And sometimes I would think this student was simply checked out, to be honest with you, because I had this faraway look in his eyes every single class. And then somewhere in the middle, we had office hours, and he said to me, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done." And we started talking about some of the stuff that happened in the process. So he did all of the exercises, and a lot of things were popping and popping. I do an exercise where people write down, for instance, whose life they want, and certain patterns emerge. We have all sorts of games and exercises. But the last thing that students do is they get back their 360 feedback. And first you assess yourself, and then you get 15, 16 raters, people who know you up, down, and sideways, to sort of talk about how you are on collaborativeness and grit and on all your EQ stuff. And then you self-assess yourself, and then you get back all the feedback from everyone. And he had thought he was doing incredibly well in finance, and that he was presenting as a person who enjoyed his work, and he was presenting as a person who was collaborative. And the marks that he got back were basically people saying, everybody to a person basically saying, "You're okay at it, but it's clear you hate it."
Wow.
And so he thought, "Oh my God, I was kidding myself." And I knew I was kidding myself, but I did not know. I thought I was pulling it off on everyone else. I mean, after all, I was bumping along in my job just fine, and everybody could feel it off me a mile away, and they just weren't telling me. And I think at work I'm collaborative, and I'm picked up as very resistant. I feel that I'm checked in, and everyone's telling me I'm checked out. And this was the moment of truth for him, because everything was stacking up. Like, none of his aptitudes were in finance. All of his aptitudes were creative and relational. So the last day he gets up to present, he actually this person who seemed checked out the entire semester actually approached me and said, I must present. Some students say, look, this is very, very personal. Please don't ask me to present. He came out, I must present. I was like, oh, okay. He gets up there. He stands in front of the class. And this is a person we knew as a button-down finance guy. And he throws up a slide of Kim Kardashian. And he said, my life's dream is to dress Kim Kardashian. And then he goes on and describes this life where he is going to move to London and become a stylist of women, because what he really has always wanted to do was to be in fashion. And he's just blowing the whole ding thing up, and he's going to be who he really is. And he went through this, in telling their 40-year narrative of their life, they have to present sort of 4 moments, and they either have to show a diary entry or an Instagram post or a made up LinkedIn post, just to sort of give us some milestones along the way about how they think they're going to get there. And after he presented this, there was like not a dry eye in the house, and the whole class was like, what? And I was just blown away. The work he had been doing was massive. The work he had done to put into this narrative of his life and how he was going to get to where he was going was very, very profound. He had really done some rigorous work about his first job, his second job, his third job. And when he was done, the class was like, there was like dead silent. I mean, he got a huge round of applause and a lot of love. And then I said to him, what is your family going to say? And he said, they're going to say, at last.
Wow.
And I was so taken aback. Right. I thought he would say they were going to say, no way, you can't do this. And he said, they're going to say at last because I think everyone has known but me, and I've been trying to meet everyone's like mine. And he is a true example of a student who suddenly became the author of his life instead of the editor. And I just love him so much. I love what happened to him so much. I don't know what will happen in his life, but I know he will never have a fake life again, because the class awoke him to the pain he was thinking that he was hiding, that he was not. And what's the point?
Yeah.
And so it was I have many stories like that. His was just sort of the most shocking in the moment, because he did not present this way at all. And the work he was doing, a lot of times when students are doing that much work, they are piping up in class, sort of saying like, this is killing me. But he was silent until the last moment. And then there was this explosion.
Wow. What an incredible story. And it is, the thing about it I love as I think about this, just having seen so many people who have gone through these processes, and on this show, of course, we have tons of guests who have found what they are meant to be doing, their area of transcendence, you say. I think I found mine in many ways. It's like, once you've seen it, it's like you're not going to go back. Like, it may be, by the way, that he decides, I'm going to work in a job that is not fashion, but on the side, I'm going to start a label, or who knows, he'll find that outlet in different ways in his life. But he knows now, and so he won't be the editor.
Yep. I mean, I think that revelation will change everything about his life going forward, for the better in so many ways. And you're right. You're absolutely right. It may not be that he will ever go dress the women in Milan, and that may not happen. It's
hard to get to Kim Kardashian. She's wearing a lot of skims.
Right. I know. A lot of people want to dress her. But I think that it was directional, and it is directional.
It's a lodestar. Totally.
Yeah.
FOMO. All right. Yeah. So before we go to our exciting and amazing lightning round, I want to ask you one last thing, which is, that story is great. For folks that are listening to this, that are like, listen, I didn't get into NYU Stern, so therefore I can't take Suzy's class, but I want more of this. Like, is there a place where we can partake in some of these tools?
Yes, there's 2 different ways. One is that very soon, I, like you, am having a podcast. It's going to be exactly me doing the Becoming You with a different individual each week. I'll do the whole process with them. They'll do the testing. And they will be exactly like one of my private clients, which I also love having. But that costs money, and the podcast is totally a free experience. And so they can contact me through my website or through Instagram or LinkedIn if they want to be on that show, and I will do the whole process with them. So that is one way. I'm hoping, and I'm writing a book. The Becoming You book will be out from Harper Business but it's going to be about a year. So
will you come back for that, please?
Yeah.
You're invited.
Don't ask twice.
Oh, you're invited. I want more time. This has been...
I will be there.
Oof. All right. Let's move on to lightning round. I got 4 questions for you. Okay. Quick answers. The first one. What's a favorite quote?
I know what it is. It's from Proverbs, and it is hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is the tree of life.
Oh, it's beautiful. I've never heard that before. Wow.
Yeah, love that one.
Okay, number 2, name one book or podcast besides one of your own that every FOMO sapien should know about.
I love how I built this. I mean, I think how I built this is just bingeable deliciousness if you love business. And it's just one fantastic entrepreneur each week. And you hear how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. And they're gritty life stories. And, they have a lot of failure and humanity in them. And I insist my students listen to it. And I also am addicted to it.
Yeah, I love it because it's not entrepreneurship porn. It is real,
It's
which
real.
is so important.
It's real. It's real.
Number 3, what's one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
Be not afraid. So, I mean, that's the most quote. The line appears something like 376 times in the Old and New Testaments. It's be not afraid. We are so afraid all the time, and a lot of times what we're afraid of just doesn't matter. My students read a poem by a great Jamaican poet that a guy doesn't marry a woman that he really loves. He's just afraid of what people will say because she's not of the same class he's of. And then at the end of his life, he goes to a party. His wife leaves him. He marries a fancy woman. He goes to a party. He gets drunk and he says, "I should have married Dolores." And they said, "Why didn't you?" And it's like, what are we afraid of? People judging us. We're just so afraid. And once you've had a kind of public failure, which all of us do at some point in our careers, I got fired. I mean, people who have public failures, it doesn't kill you and actually makes people like you better because you're more human. And so stop being scared. I would say that to myself. I was pretty scared.
I love that.
I'm not anymore,
like if you don't get over it, the world will beat you so hard that you will, hopefully. But sometimes people don't get out of that, and then they don't become themselves. Final one. Yeah. What's your most important memory?
I have a really profound memory that sort of everything that I loved about my life was all together. And it was when my son, I have 4 children, and my second son, my third child, married his magnificent wife, Eva, who I've known since she was a little girl. They met when they were 14 years old. Wow. And when they were around 24, they got married. And it was the last time that my husband passed away, was able to be out of the house. And he made it down the aisle. And we both gave walked Marcus down to get married to Eva. And all of our friends were there. And it was just precious because everything that mattered was all there together in one place. It was a beautiful, holy ceremony. And we saw the beginning of 2 lives together. And we were just as gracefully as we could saying farewell to another set of lives. So it's bittersweet because, but everyone I loved was in that space all at the same time. And it was a very joyous moment for Jack, which I'm so happy we were able to create for him.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I was, in a sense, there with you just hearing about it, because I think so few times we get that in life. And so to have that is really special.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, it took a lot to get him there. He was determined. I have a photograph of it, and you can actually, in some ways, physically see how hard it was for him. And yet what the picture actually has Jack looking in Marcus's eyes, and I'm looking on. And that is actually sort of how I remember was the love between them as we handed him off to his life to Eva, who we also love so much. And so it was, there are moments like that are very, very profound. That was one of them. So it used to be that I almost couldn't talk about it, but it's been 4 years. So I'm getting to the point where these I can actually have these memories and just sort of say, that was good. That was good. And even though it was so sad, it was good.
And maybe helps us to think about those moments in ours as well. Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, if you want to learn more, and there will be the podcast coming and the book coming, but for now, you can go to SuzyWelch.com. That's with a Z. You can also find Suzy on Instagram at Suzy Welch, and on LinkedIn, Suzy Welch, creator of the class Becoming You at NYU. Thank you so much for being here.
Loved it. Thank you for having me.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.